Hey everyone, what's up? Today is March 31st, which marks the Transgender Day of Visibility, and so I wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you about a couple of important topics. In this video, we're going to discuss one of my favorite talking points, that transness is normal. Specifically, we're going to talk about a common response I get to that statement. So when I say that trans people are normal, I frequently get the response that this is somehow mathematically untrue or statistically incorrect. Now, most people aren't doing this intentionally to cause harm. I did it myself before I learned the word cisgender. It's easy to end up using this language incidentally without any intent to cause harm just because we've heard it so often. But that doesn't change the very real harm that it actually does to transgender people. All the same, if you're one of those people who argues that trans people aren't normal just because you are used to the word normal as just being how you distinguish yourself and other people like you from people who are trans, then I know you probably don't mean harm to trans people, but I still hope you'll be open and able to learn from our conversation today. On the other hand, if you're one of those people who is doing this intentionally, let me tell you, I'm actually glad to see you trying to disguise your hatred as intellectualism, because honestly, these conversations are much easier for me to have than conversations about philosophy or beliefs. But at the same time, I feel really sorry for you, because what you probably don't realize is that you just brought the proverbial knife to a gunfight. So let's break this down. What do these people mean when they say that trans people are statistically or mathematically abnormal? Well, the word normal can be defined as conforming to a standard, such as being common, typical, or expected. Conversely, abnormal can be taken to mean a deviation from this. Hold on, that's an interesting word, deviation. We'll come back to that in a minute. For now, let's just focus on these other words: typical, expected, common. If we said that trans people are typical, we wouldn't exactly be correct. If we said that trans people are atypical, well, that's actually entirely correct. Given the dangers in coming out and living openly as transgender, and how the enforcement of a false gender binary likely leads many non-binary trans individuals to identify as cisgender on the basis of their genital category, the number I'm about to give you is pretty much guaranteed to be inaccurately low. But current estimates by researchers say that transgender people make up approximately 0.33% of any given population, with the other 99.7% obviously being cis people, or literally people who are not trans. So it's clear to see, even if that estimate on the trans population is low, it's still pretty obvious that cis people are more common, and no one's arguing against that point. Trans people are atypical. Most people are not trans. We are less common. You could even say unexpected, because given the odds that only 1 out of every 300 people you'll meet or interact with will be trans, you can reasonably expect that most of the people you'll ever encounter probably aren't trans. But I bet that number is probably a lot higher than you thought it was. And given the average person will interact with approximately 80,000 people in our lifetimes, and the odds that 267 of those people will be trans, maybe you should expect us. But here's the point. When we're talking about trans people being normal, we really aren't having a conversation about statistics or the mathematics of how common we are or aren't. We aren't talking about charts or bell curves. We're talking about language, particularly the psychosocial aspects of language and how it impacts perceptions and attitudes, which lead directly to how society shapes an individual's life and experiences. Most words in the English language have multiple definitions, but nearly every word has at least 2. There are denotations, which are the definitions you'll find in the dictionary, which are generally very neutral. And then there are connotations, which you won't find in the dictionary. You can get a better idea of a word's connotations by using a thesaurus, but the best way to really know a word's connotations is just by being in society and paying attention to the way the words are used. Unlike denotations, connotations are almost always loaded, but there are some words which don't really have much of a biased connotation. For example, those words we spoke about earlier: typical, expected, common. These are fairly neutral terms and well suited to an intellectual conversation. We could argue against expected, but the positive association with that word is fairly weak, and the negative association with unexpected, frequently associated with inconvenience, is similarly weak, so we're going to let it slide. Normal and its antonym, abnormal, are a different matter entirely. We can start with these by going to a thesaurus, where we'll find words like common, typical, expected, prevalent, all relatively unloaded terms. But we'll also find words like acceptable, natural, ordinary, popular, acknowledged, real, all very positive connotations. Meanwhile, if we go back and look at the word abnormal, we find words like aberrant, bizarre, irregular, odd, strange, unnatural, gross, different, deviant. Those are some pretty strongly negative words. And there's that word again. Deviation, or in this case, deviant, departing not just from the standard, but by definition from acceptable standards, especially in social or sexual behavior, related to the word devious, literally meaning underhanded or evil, which is how the world learns to see us, by classifying us as abnormal. Society learns to see trans people as perverts, villains, deceivers, and predators, none of which are accurate perceptions. A transgender person is less common, but we are not bizarre, strange, unnatural, gross, or devious. We are in fact the opposite of these things, which we have already discussed makes us literally normal. We're not talking about statistics. We're talking about the positive affirmation that transgender people are good, ordinary people who just want to live our lives like anyone else. You may try to disguise and attempt at vilifying us as a conversation about statistics, but we literally all see through that, and none of it changes the fact that trans people are normal and deserve an equal level of justice and respect and dignity as cisgender people. And before I wrap up this conversation, I did promise that I would talk a little bit about that word, which is so guaranteed to piss people off: cisgender. I'm not going to get too in-depth because I already have an entire video exclusively on that subject, but here's the basic idea. Knowing that normal is such a loaded word gives us a lot of additional insight into its use and how it really only exists in many cases for the purposes of being able to say that something is abnormal, essentially to denormalize and stigmatize that which can be considered to be different or the other by the virtues of not being included in the group of that which is considered to be normal. And so when you come from that tradition of calling yourself normal in order to be able to say that we're the freaks, it can be easy to feel like we, the freaks, calling ourselves normal is in some way calling you abnormal, essentially saying that you're the real freak. Only none of us think that way, and literally no one is saying that cisgender people aren't normal. But then again, our society is so stuck up on binaries that we literally think of cats and dogs as somehow being opposites, so it's easy to see where that confusion and the idea that somehow us calling ourselves normal means that we're attempting to exclude you from the set of human beings which are normal, but we're not. Literally every human being is normal. The only thing that we're saying you're not is transgender, or trans, which is actually the Latin-rooted prefix of the word, meaning across from, which has an antonym with no real English cognate meaning on the same side of. The prefix cis, used in cisgender, literally on the same side of gender as opposed to across from gender, which is a defined word in the English language with a denotation in the dictionary, but no negative connotation. Because unlike the stigma society places on trans people for not being cis, literally no one, not even trans people, places a stigma on cis people just for not being trans. As always, thank you so very much for watching, and I want to take a moment to wish everyone a happy Transgender Day of Visibility. Until next time, remember that transgender people are normal, and be yourself. Hey everyone! Thanks again so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw today, don't forget to hit that like button and share so your friends can enjoy it too. There's more where that came from, including activism and awareness videos, tutorials, you can follow my transition, and even check out some of my music. I also want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters because y'all make this channel possible. If you're not a patron yet and you want to find out how you can get awesome rewards like autographed pictures from my modeling shoots, just go to www.patreon.com/DeliaMelody to find out how you can sign up. See you next time and be yourself.